Welcome back. Well, live coverage this evening here on The Pulse from that press conference given tonight by the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Ronald Lamola, and Cathy, talking, of course, about that new interministerial committee and new efforts to try and stop corruption related to COVID-19 procurement.
Absolutely. So let's get reaction to it then this evening. Judith February is with the Wits School of Governance and she joins us now. Judith, good evening. A pleasure to have you on. Firstly, what do you make of this coordinated response by Cabinet, also now establishing their own structure to investigate these corruption claims?
Well, good evening, Cathy. It's good to be with you. Well, we've heard a lot of it before, and of course, much of what the Minister of Justice was saying was in the President's newsletter on Monday, particularly around this task team, and then also around, I'm calling it a task team of ministers, and then he called it a committee, I think, and then also the point around the fusion centres. So, Cathy, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. We really do need to see action, and we need to see it fast. And what sort of slightly worried me about what Minister Lamola was saying is he talked about the fusion centre, which really is bringing together SARS, FICA, the Hawks, the SAPS, the SIU to work together. And really he was talking about that perhaps becoming something which will be governed by its own piece of legislation. But really what he was saying is that this needs to grow organically. And that sort of makes me shudder a little bit, because we don't really have time for things to grow organically. We've billions of rands being looted out of PPE contracts related to COVID-19. This is the difference between whether people live or die. It is an emergency. And so this sort of slowly, softly approach isn't really going to help us. But at the same time, as he also said, it's not the role of Cabinet to direct law enforcement agencies to do their job.
I think it's been tried before, if I recall, or certainly the President tried it once. Judith, I do need to ask, I mean, we've got a lot of public outrage, and in a democracy like ours, what that leads to is calls for action. But if I understand the law properly, and I'm not a lawyer, but it's not illegal for a relative, a child, a sibling, whatever, of a cabinet minister or of someone in the ANC to do business with government.
No, it's not, Stephen, and so therefore, and this is an interesting point, because we do know, and I mean, there's many of us who've done work around post-employment restrictions, for instance, in the public service, that once you are in the public service and you leave, that there's a period of gardening leave, you may not be doing business with the state and so on. But indeed, it is not illegal to do so, and we've already seen that Mohlahlana and members of the ANC are saying that, and saying that quite openly. The question is whether it is good practice, and I would say that something needs to be done with regard to that, that if you are a politician, anybody connected to a political party, that it has to be an exceptional case in which a tender is granted to you. And so here we have, Stephen, what we have is an ANC problem. We have snouts at the trough, and we have individuals who are connected to high-profile individuals and politicians who tenders are dished out to them. And, you know, you can have the legal change. One has to be very careful, though, around restrictions on one's freedom to do business and restraints of trade. And so you'd have to have a balancing of rights. But I don't think that that is impossible. And certainly it is, if you're someone like Mohlahlana, for example, you're the Secretary General, the most powerful position within the ANC, one could argue. And therefore, his family members should not be allowed, in my view, to be doing business with the state. And the second leg of that, however, is if perhaps one does have a situation where that happens, that there has to be 100% transparency, so that the public has the right to know who's getting the tender, and if you've got the tender, that we're able to see whether there is value for money. I think all of this needs to be published. It needs to be open so that it can be subject to scrutiny, and indeed to be seeing who the other people were who were bidding for these contracts.
And when you speak about the issue of transparency, Judith, of course, part of what is being announced today is that the committee is going to receive all of the procurement contracts that have been awarded during this time, and these are to be published and made accessible to the public. It sounds to me like an administrative nightmare. Will it include just the national departments? Will it go as far down as municipal level? How do you see this playing out when you look at the true state of our public service?
Cathy, I see it playing out, and that was exactly the question that was running through my mind, because a lot of this corruption is corruption at provincial and local level. We've seen that. And so which are the contracts that the Minister of Finance is going to look at, and who will be perusing these contracts? And, you know, there are people in civil society who will be going through the information with a fine-tooth comb. But really, how do you, and some of those contracts won't just be able to be released. You'd have to redact certain information. So, I mean, I'm all for transparency. I'm just wondering if ex post facto, how it will work. And I can see us all getting lost in the mud and mired in the detail of it. And then it's sort of becoming a paper chase and an administrative nightmare, as you say, and we'll be none the wiser. And so it feels to me as if, yeah, it can be a paper dump. Also, Cathy, I mean, my question was, how do we know what contracts have been missed out? You know, so, for example, if you're getting 100 documents from, say, the Department of Health or so on, well, you know, how do we know there weren't 102 contracts and the 2 that you were missing? You know, where is the money that was spent? Where is the money, to whom was it dispersed? So it's a legal and administrative nightmare around this. And also what they're saying is that those who tendered, we need to know who those individuals are. This is the kind of stuff that needs to be done at the start of a process. And also South Africa doesn't have a centralized tendering database. Kenneth Brown in the department, in the National Treasury, he was working on that feverishly. But again, he has retired and came under very definite threat of his position because of what he was trying to do. So these are problems which are deeply embedded in the state, and I'm afraid we can't just superficially deal with them. I'm wondering whether now is the time for a special investigative unit only on COVID-related corruption, and then a court which deals immediately and quickly with individuals, and there've got to be some high-profile individuals if we're going to really show people that crime doesn't pay.
Judith, we've had moments of really great social outrage before at corruption. I mean, some people, we understand, made money out of the funeral of Nelson Mandela, for goodness sake. There have been similar incidents in the past. I mean, Issa Demeni comes to mind. Does this feel different in some way?
It feels different, I think, Stephen, purely because we're at a moment of a global pandemic. And so, as I said before, life or death. But then life, Issa Demeni, was a matter of life or death. And the callous and cold-hearted way in which, firstly, people were dealt with, and then that sort of moral bankruptcy that goes along with the corruption is something which is about the soul of a country, which is a different discussion. But so it feels as if there is an urgency also to this, because we've got an IMF loan that we're supposed to be spending wisely. And are the snots going to be at the trough when we're trying to disperse funds out of this IMF loan? So I think the urgency is around that. And also that South Africa's letter of intent to the IMF was rather generalized. So how will that money be spent? And I think there's grave concern about that. And also the fact that it just seems as if one needs a really galvanized effort. And, the NPA not so long ago, Shamila Batoy, the national director, was at Parliament saying, please don't cut my budget. So although Minister Lamola tonight said, the budgets won't be cut, they'll be looking at resources, I think we need to be throwing money at this and getting good, honest people to do the work and to fast-track some of these cases. Because if you have 1 or 2 examples of high-profile individuals who are arrested, I think that will make a huge difference. So I'm not sure that it feels different. When I listened to Minister Lamola this evening, it just feels as if we're not quite getting it. It's another commission, it's another structure we're trying to set out and to see how it goes. There's no time for that. The kitty is already bare. We can't afford to also have this looting continue with impunity and shamelessness.
Judith February, thank you very much indeed from the Wits School of Governance.
Absolutely, some insightful comments there from her, reflecting on the briefing by the Justice Minister Ronald Lamola.